Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Climbing Sycamores podcast, where we look at today's topics to get a better view of Christianity. I'm Annie Beege, and I'm joined by my friends Ben Sadler and Matt Harbach. Rolling. All right. Hey, how's it going?
I want to hear your story. What?
Okay, my friends are jerks. So last night, I've never seen the movie Steel Magnolias. Have you seen this?
My wife loves this movie. I've never seen it, but she loves it.
I hadn't seen it either, and my best friend in high school was like, "You gotta watch this. You gotta watch this." And I never did because it felt too like chick kind of to me.
And you're not one of
and
them.
I'm not really like that, right? So. But we were talking about it, and two of my girlfriends, and it's back in the theaters for the 35th anniversary. So they're like, "Yes, Annie, you have to see this movie." I'm like, "Oh, am I gonna cry?" And they're like, "Yeah," and I'm like, So then I went and bought like a giant box of tissue, like kind of as a joke, like, oh, "Okay, yeah, I got my tissue." Oh no,
You did it.
Oh, so bad. So bad. Like the whole theater was just snotty. Like you could just hear everybody snorting.
Where is it? Is it it's all week? Or just,
I'm not sure.
Okay.
It was at the Ridge in New Berlin.
Okay.
But it was a good movie. It was woman power.
Yeah.
Kind of. But then it was just about life and friendships and mother-daughter relationships and loss and all that. So like it was good.
Snotty. So you do have a soul. You do have a heart.
I do have a heart, everybody. I do. I cried. Yes. We were all
so
crying.
Why are your friends jerks now?
Because they made me go watch that movie and cry.
Oh, okay, I got you.
Yeah, that's why.
I can't picture you
Crying?
Yes, I can't picture it that side of you.
It was ugly.
It
was a good, I'm an ugly cry. Yes, and I was puffy. Yeah.
Our daughter Shelby
Yeah.
is so emotional. The other night she came home and she was like literally crying. She's like, "I ran over a possum or a raccoon or some kind of varmint," and she's like, and I pictured it, wanting just to go home to its family until I came home, right? And I was crying the whole way home.
Aww.
That was funny.
Yeah.
So
It's all part of the food chain, Shelbs.
yeah, that's right.
Yep.
But she has a very thick, kind of strong, don't mess with me also personality, but then she also has this other caring side. So anyways.
So hell froze over.
That's right.
That's all.
All right. Well, today we want to talk about a theme that we've kind of touched on before, but it just keeps on coming up. And I got into a YouTube vortex, unfortunately. And, sometimes you get in there and you can't get out. And it was on OJ because, he passed away a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I think. And I remember where I was. I was in home ec class in middle school, 1994.
Oh, it was 94.
Yeah, I think I was sixth grader. And we stopped the class to listen on the radio. Wasn't on TV, it was on the radio it was also on the TV too, but I think it was also to listen what the verdict was. And I remember, everyone being confused, some people excited and cheering, but it really was, everybody was watching this because O.J. Simpson was a well-known Hall of Fame football player. He was in comedy movies, Naked Gun, and he was a Monday Night Football announcer, and everybody seemed to love him. And then behind the scenes, there was domestic abuse issues, and the cops were always over there because he would beat the crap out of Nicole. And then when she and this other man were murdered, which obviously was OJ, he ran away. He fled in a vehicle,
The white Bronco, the
white
infamous
Bronco.
white Bronco. Yeah,
I know. And but anyways, watching these videos on his personality, and in the ministry over the years, I continue to see the same personality. You can just tell it. And and what Jesus says in John chapter 10, he says, there's people out there who are wolves in sheep's clothing, and you have to be able to detect the wolves in sheep's clothing. That's a really interesting description. In sheep's clothing, they look like they're helpless. They look like you should care for them. They look like poor, helpless victims. And yet inside, Jesus says they're ferocious wolves. So I just want to talk about some of those traits and wanted to know if there's anything. Now, Matt, you knew about OJ somehow, what, her history class or something, or what was
ancient history class?
Yeah, you said you knew about this case. How did you know about this?
I don't know. I don't remember.
It's just
when
that
I first,
famous that
Yeah,
It's pop culture.
everyone knew about it, but I was not born when
Obviously.
it happened. Obviously.
What I didn't know back then, which got into the YouTube vortex, is that just the video of him blaming Nicole as she was a bad wife and didn't take care of the kids. When he came out, or during the whole trial, he was laughing. He was very involved. He said, we have to be good to the judge because the judge is like the father of the jury. We have to be good to everybody. He was playing the whole thing, and he thought he was untouchable. And in a way, he kind of was for a little while, and yet the Lord did bring him to justice in many different ways. And didn't seem like there's any repentance, and now he's going to be facing the wrath of God. But the traits were, it was always everybody else's fault. He was the victim. Poor him. It was a race-related issue. And you're just playing all these different things, and never wanted to take ownership for any of these things. And like, he would hide outside Nicole's house after they got a divorce and scare her and check up on her. And if she was dating anybody else, he would, intimidate all of them. And I see these same traits in people. And a lot of times the women who are not always women, very often the perpetrator is a male. These men know how to, you talked about a case where they know how to get their hooks in these women. Yeah.
Find the hole, find the need, find the vulnerable spot, fill that spot, and then that person is forever.
Yeah. They're Prince Charming, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Whatever that they needed, they know how to do it.
Boy, and I just feel like a way to identify that is if it's too good to be true, like it probably is.
Right.
Like not, I don't know. Ugh.
Yeah, too good to be true. And then does the person, here's the other big red flag. Does the person say one thing and does another thing? That is 100% of the cases that I've seen where they say, oh, yeah, I'll meet you at this place, or I'll do this at this time. And you might feel like this is small, but then if there's like a pattern over and over again where they always say they did the right thing. Well, yeah, I spent the money, but it's for our family. Or yes, I didn't show up, but it was for a good reason. And then always blaming somebody else, usually the spouse, blaming their spouse for all the problems. And they're doing something different than what they say. That is a huge sign, and that's why Jesus said, you'll know a tree by its fruit. Look at the actions. So I think that's another red flag. But even after, so in OJ's case, when he wrote his confession book, if I had done it.
Oh, I love that.
Oh man, again, the gall and the boldness and the arrogance and the ego there. But the whole book was, Nicole was the problem. She was a bad mom. And then when they got to the whole murder scene, I blacked out. I think I did it, but I blacked out during the whole thing. I was in such an angry rage. I don't know what happened. You're still guilty. So the other thing that's really sad about this is, you don't want to victim blame but the hard thing is victims often don't know where to go because they've worked so hard to intimidate, to say you're nothing without me, you can't get on, you can't move on without me.
Yes.
That it's like an addict who can't get away from their drug. It's like they think they can't live without this substance. They can't live without this abusive relationship because they're masters of manipulators. So that's the saddest part is like you want to help these people and give them every opportunity. And so what I usually tell people is, if you're working with somebody like this, when you see they're in a relationship and they're going in a bad direction and you know that this abusive person, like, you're probably not going to convince them because anything you work too hard at is just going to reinforce what the perpetrator is probably saying to them. But just to say, I'll always be here for you.
Yep.
You can always come home.
Yep.
No questions are asked. And I will always support you and protect you as much, so those kinds of things.
Because I think so often too, these types of people will isolate you from your family. They will
Exactly.
pit you
That's
against
another red flag.
against your against your family and keep you away from the people that can talk sense into you and be good influence on you.
Yes.
And so then they keep you isolated. I mean, I literally fell victim to this when I was like 19. Terrible. And we didn't use the term narcissist at that time, but it just became so evident after I was out of it, where it was like, just, and I've got friends who have been through it more recently, where like they'll say one thing, they'll do something else, but then they'll claim and swear that they told you, they make you think you're absolutely bonkers.
Right.
Just crazy. Like, I never said that. I never ever said that. And you're like, no, I know you said that.
Right.
And I don't know if that's a part of the game or if they can't keep it straight or like what, but it's, it just gives me the willies.
And I don't know if they all go to a convention or something, but because they all use the same, like, as their tactics. But yeah, that whole
strategy booklet.
Yeah, there's an abusive strategy. That's that whole idea of gaslighting from the movie Gaslight.
Gaslighting.
Yeah, and so it's been, I don't know when that movie came out. It was in the 20s or 30s, but it goes through that relationship, and he's doing the exact same thing, trying to make her feel like she's going crazy. What I also found is that when these people are very often religious, that very often, at least maybe it's because people I work with are very often Christians, but they will use, if they are Christians, they will use the Christian language and faith to keep the person in control. Like, oh, a good Christian woman wouldn't divorce, or a good Christian woman wouldn't do that, or you're not being submissive like the Bible says, or all these kinds of things. And then talking about isolation, they often bounce around to lots of churches, and until they kind of realize that the game is up, then they'll move to another church. Oh, they don't really care about you there, or they're strict, or they're not faithful enough. Like, that's another one. They're not orthodox enough at that church. So then they'll move you to another place. And what really makes me frustrated is very often they can fool the other pastor. Like, oh yeah, they'll say, oh, that church is kind of off the rails, but I'm glad I'm here at this church now. And you, pastor, you get me, and you, pastor. And they start kind of doting on the pastor to try to keep this whole persona. And so I've tried to, when I've seen these sort of situations, like call the pastor and say, you got to be aware of this.
Heads up, somebody's coming your way.
Right. And sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't, and that's kind of the sad thing. But the patterns are there. And if you can help, I tell especially Shelby, I've kind of walked through these patterns with my daughter just to kind of say, all right, just be aware of this. If somebody's saying one thing, doing another, if somebody's trying to isolate you away from family, if somebody is, trying to confuse you or always doting, but then blames you for all the problems.
Because I think here's what you have. You have, in a lot of these cases, as I felt personally and from my friends I've talked to, it's like you have a reasonable person is the victim, a reasonable person who is trying to make the relationship work,
right?
Is doing things, taking the other person with good intention and saying like, oh, what you're saying makes sense. Like, oh, you know what? I could be better there.
Yeah.
I could do a better job here.
Right.
I could work harder in this, and and so by the time you start reasonable, and by the time you're done, you were just like worn down to nothing.
Right.
It's insane.
And just chipping away a little bit each time.
And all because you're the reasonable person who's like just trying to make the relationship work, and you're just being completely taken advantage of.
I think also these people will especially target somebody in a kind of a vulnerable situation. If they're just coming off of a breakup, or if they're isolated, struggling with their parents, or whatever it is, like that is another thing. And so that's something else that I think we can teach our kids is like, you need to be strong. You need to be aware, you want to, was it trust but verify, you want to trust somebody, but you also have to let them back it up with actions. And if their actions aren't matching up with their words, get out, get away. Also, if you can, I think intervene early, but then once the hook is laid in, then you just have to be there to hopefully it crashes and you can be there to catch the person too. So Matt, do you have any experience with this? Is this all new territory? Have you seen this happen? What do you think?
Do you practice this?
I'm not going to answer any of those questions.
It's everybody else's fault.
Yeah.
The best piece of advice that I've heard recently on this topic is that just behavior is a language, and just treat it like that. There isn't say one thing, do another. It's say one thing, then lie. Because you just said something else by what you did,
Yeah.
Not that that's just semantics, but
I know.
Because that's what people always. Because I've talked to people like this, and they're like, "Yeah, but you don't understand." I'm like, "Oh, I don't. I've got two eyes.
Yeah,
like, I do understand."
They say people will.
You're getting
people will
tricked.
show you who they are.
Right. And so if you just treat people's actions and you just translate that into a sentence, you figure out a lot faster what they're actually thinking.
The other thing is you can't reason with these people. I remember one of the newscasters did an interview with Saddam Hussein. I mean, this is like, 25, 30 years ago. And, he's this evil dictator or whatever. And, again, plays the victim. Oh, I never did that. Oh, no, that never happened. And why would you say that? You're attacking me.
Yes.
And it's like you can't reason with terrorists. You can't negotiate with terrorists. So I think that's the other thing that people get trapped in is that you think you're talking with a reasonable person also. You think you can, but once you kind of identify this personality and you see the narcissism or you see the ego, you can call them on it, but then you just got to protect the other people and do what you can to protect them. You're not going to change this person. No, God could. I mean, God could, but it's going to take enormous amount of pain for God to get through to this person, usually, I think. I've seen it happen. I know of one person that was a classic, horrible, narcissistic, abusive person that changed, but only after a very messy divorce, only after a really tragic situation, and I still wouldn't trust this person with anything legitimate, but it seemed like they were at least able to acknowledge that they were wrong. And that's what a lot of times the victim is they want to hear, I'm sorry. If I just try a little harder, if I could just work with this person, maybe they'll apologize. They probably won't. And you just have to accept that and move on. So I know it's kind of a depressing topic, but I think it's important because.
Well, what do you do with a person like that?
Well, again, where does this come from? Is this biological? Is this environment? Is this? What do you do with it? Both.
Yeah.
Where does it come from, and what do you do about it with them?
I think it's a victim who blames everybody else, is not willing to take responsibility for their life.
And does that come from the way they were raised?
I think sometimes. I think it's both. Yeah, like they went through something, at least from my limited perspective. Sometimes they either have childhood, teenage years, something like that, where they feel wronged, and then they get bitter, and they feel justified in whatever else they have to do to make everybody else feel as much pain as they have, and they overcome their pain or their circumstance by controlling somebody else. That's what I've seen. I don't know if you can make. There's probably more studies on that could track the origin of narcissism better than that, but that's what I've seen. I don't know. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I'm not sure.
If you look at a lot of the, movies or drama where there's a villain, that's kind of what a villain has a hard childhood or something, backstory.
Yeah, but so do the heroes sometimes too.
Exactly. And so you have a choice. I think a lot of times we do have a choice that, all right, you've had something really bad happen to you. Isn't Voldemort and Harry Potter both orphans? A lot of times they're orphans, or
Mm-hmm,
or you have some really bad that happened to you, and you either can respond to that by saying, all right, but I'm going to do better. I'm going to bring good into the world. I'm going to make sure no one else is an orphan. Or you can say, I'm all my own,
Woe is
and
me.
everybody else should feel the pain I do, and I think there is a choice, and it seems like once you kind of lay down those tracks and you say, this is the road I'm going to go on, it's not good. It's hard to undo those tracks,
And then what do you do? What do you do with people? I mean, there's people all over walking around.
You're a
like
pastor.
this.
You're not allowed to just turn people away, are
Yeah,
you?
what do you do with these people?
I think you let them know you're not playing their game, because they want to play the victim. They want to blame everybody else, and you call them on it. And I mean, I had this is a little bit different but similar. A good friend of mine is like an expert. He's world renowned for child protection. He was a child abuse lawyer, and now he runs an organization called Zero Abuse Project. And he said, when it comes to like pedophiles and who are searching out victims, he said a child protection policy and a strong front will not necessarily change them, but they'll go somewhere else.
Yes, where it's make it hard.
You make it hard. And I feel like that's my job, is like, let people know I see you, I'm onto your game, and hopefully they move on. And I'm willing to work with them, but I'm not gonna ever give in to their woe is me, or that everybody's the problem, or that my spouse, if you would just know how bad she was, and you never let them sit in that.
These people always kind of sniff them out while they're in a relationship, though, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Otherwise, you wouldn't really be able to identify them.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's you can sniff not only, because there's somebody else I'm thinking of where this person, again, it's the saying the one thing, doing another. They want to control the narrative. They're usually on the run from a previous situation that they're trying to cover up. So that's what it is. And you recognize that they're portraying something that's not true about themselves. So yeah, I think in John 10, Jesus talks about the good shepherd protecting his sheep. And so I think that's one of my jobs, is like identifying the wolves and protecting the sheep. And so being able to call them out, confront them, and I think that has kept some. I think when pastors do that, you do keep the church safe. Sometimes it's physically safe, like when you let them know we got security here, we got all these things. They move away. When you let them know your games don't work here, they go play their games somewhere else. So I think that's what our role is, according to what Jesus would say. I've heard and read studies that said they love counseling because they can just dote about themselves and talk about themselves. And you have to be a really wise counselor to be able to, again, call them on this. Or it's interesting that you brought that up, that everybody else is the problem. Tell me more about you. We're not there. Those people aren't here right now. What's going on with you? So yeah, I think that those are just really important.
But like in terms of like spiritual care, like how do you approach that situation?
I think you have to. You're probably dealing with somebody with a hard heart.
Out of my pay grade.
Yeah, right. And so even Moses and Jesus talks about wiping the dust off your feet. And so I think if the person continues to lie to you and they continue to play the game, you continue to call them what they are, and you continue to point out the hardness of their heart, and that you're going to protect the person that they're trying to control. So that's, I think that's where spiritually many pastors get it wrong, because you don't become a pastor to confront people. You want to bring the gospel. You want to bring redemption. And again, there's times where redemption happens just usually happens after jail time, you know, like but until they've really felt a lot of pain, and they have a very high pain tolerance. So that's where I think a lot of pastors fall into trouble, is they'll be too quick to give the gospel. I forget the name of the guy. There was a Missouri Synod pastor who was asked to minister to Nazi soldiers before their trial and execution. The Nuremberg trials, is that where that was? Anyways, he wrote on this that he talked with psychologists, he talked to other pastors, he got all the information he could, and there was some of the Nazi soldiers that he gave absolution to, gave the Lord's Supper to, and he was at their execution. Like he thought they legitimately converted, they legitimately accepted their, were honest about the horrible things they did. And there was some that he refused to give them the Lord's Supper. He saw them out for what they were, and his advice was, when you don't be too quick to give the gospel. And I think pastors, especially Lutheran pastors, the first moment that somebody says something, we want to jump in with the gospel. The first time I really kind of figured this out was probably about 12 years ago now. Maybe not that much, 10 years. I just got to my previous congregation, and this guy comes in with his girlfriend, and they start attending our church. And they're like, he comes up, he starts doting on me, and I'm a new pastor, basically. And
you were eating it up, weren't you?
I was eating it up. He's like, "Oh, you have such good services here, and your sermons are so helpful." And
you're so
we
kind.
would, yeah. I'm like, "Oh, wow, that's great, thank you." And then he's like, "We want to get married here." Oh, that's great. Well, let's go through the pre-marriage counseling. So we went through that, and then this 6 days before the wedding, he's like, "Oh, by the way, if you see something in the newspaper, I just want to let you know, yeah, I took a plea deal, and so it looks worse than it is." I was like, "Oh," and I think if I wouldn't have had this other friend, the guy I mentioned before, Victor Veith, I called him up. I was like, "All right, I'm marrying this couple in 6 days. What do I do about this?" And he was like, "Ask for a release of information.
Yep.
You need to look at the police report yourself, and what did the lawyers say? Because you've taken a plea deal. You don't just take a plea deal.
It's got to be pretty bad.
Yeah,
freedom.
Right, exactly. So he just really helped me, and so that almost a confession, you have to watch out for the almost a confession. Oh, by the way,
Yeah.
this thing is happening, but it's really not that big of a deal.
Nobody's
yes,
perfect.
I did some bad stuff. Nobody's perfect, right? And so that's another telltale sign. So I started to kind of be a little slower to not just jump in with the gospel. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't know. What do you think?
Makes sense to me.
I don't know. I wasn't there.
It seems like these people are often just really, really, really smart.
Very
also,
smart.
To be able to keep up. Like, I am too dumb to be a liar. Like, I'm just too stupid to keep up with it. Honestly, like I couldn't, I don't remember what I did yesterday hardly, and so they're just incredibly smart to be able to kind of weave these lies and keep track of who they're telling what to. And
they're attaching to you because you're in a position of authority, right? Mm-hmm. You're in a place of influence. So they're going to go right away to you before anyone else has a chance to tell you differently.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's for pastors, I think that's another warning that I wish somebody would have told me at seminary is like, be careful who are the people who come up to you right away and are eager to talk to you and are eager to share with you their stories. And like, I fell for that because those were, when I look back, it was all those people who were the problems, the one who's, yeah. So you have to be aware.
Is this intentional? Because I feel like I've come across this type of person in a different spectrum. So like, sometimes I feel like it's intentional and it's the world owes me, and sometimes it's just kind of inherently who they are. Does that make sense?
Sure. There's probably varying levels of it. I think when you are talking with somebody you can tell they're trying to control somebody else. and they have their, whether it's controlling a coworker, usually a spouse.
But what if they're not like conscious? Is this a conscious thing? Like, is it ever like, this is the person I'm going to start working on? Or is it just maybe you have something that they want? And so let's face it. We all use each other. You know what I mean? Like
There's a villain in all of us. Yeah.
Right. Or just, no, I just even
Capability.
mean, in friendships and
Sure.
everything, like, you know, I don't know. I just feel like, is there a conscious intention of saying, this is the person, I'm going to use this person, versus I'm just trying to get what I want, and I'm just throwing out, you know.
You might flatter someone or be extra nice to them, you know.
Right, because you're maybe looking to get something you want, as opposed to just a really conscious decision.
Yeah, I think that we've talked about these categories before, but yeah, if it's like just a foolish, chaotic person who's living in survival mode, they're not malicious.
Yeah.
But they're
haphazard.
Haphazard. But even in that case, like if they feel some pain from it, they'll wake up to some of it. And I think the difference is when that person, no matter how much you talk to them or how many consequences they feel, like they hold on to their story. They hold on to their innocence. They hold on to their control. In the one case that I'm thinking of the guy who lost his marriage, went through a lot of hardship, and then was finally kind of converted. I think he's a little bit more honest. He told his ex-wife, "Oh yeah, I knew what I was doing." He told her, he says, I was trying to make you feel like you're going crazy. I was trying to do this. And he was in our small group Bible study. I mean, this is years ago. And I really liked this guy. He was great, you know, and so many ways he was just, you know, a guy that was close to all of us. And it was actually two guys in that Bible study. They both did the same thing. And proposed and was generous and nice and calm, and you know, I would have trusted him with anything. And then it was in the honeymoon that he broke this person, and he put down all these rules, and he said, "You're mine now," and all this stuff. And it just got worse from then. Isolation, all the different stories. But so I think I've heard that question before. Is this intentional? I think the reason we ask that question is because we can't imagine not having a conscience.
Right.
And that's why we ask it. But I think they know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if because they don't have a conscience, like in the sense, like there's not a wrestling inside of them. Like, is this right? I think they have convinced themselves that it's owed to them.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That they've been wronged, that they've had a hardship, and they deserve this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I don't feel like they know what they're doing, and they feel justified in doing it. And they have to almost like, I think that was Alexander Solzhenitsyn who said, like, what makes Stalin Stalin and Hitler Hitler is they changed what good and evil was. They called good evil and evil good. And so there was no, they felt justified. Like, get rid of the Jews. Yeah, they're a parasite. And so there is no remorse. There's no, and so when these people do this, you're waiting for them to apologize. You're waiting for them to wake up, but they don't. They feel so justified in their control that this person deserves it and they deserve it, that they don't think about it like we do.
I think too, one other defense, particularly with regard to like isolation, is just to really try to have a strong friend group and like family around, and if your friends don't like the person, and not just like one friend is like, oh, you know, that person annoys me, but if like collectively your friends are like,
this person's changing you,
you need to listen. Like, you have to listen.
I agree.
Before things get just totally unhinged.
But it's so hard,
because usually
by that time this person's already said, oh, they don't care about you like I care about you, and we need to get away from that.
Or it's a you can go hang out with your friends, and then the time comes, and then there's a big argument, and then it's like, oh no, you know, and then you have to go cancel with your friends, and then it just is like this slow. I just remember it's a slow process of just.
And they play the long game.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just
so
have your support group.
I don't know. I've seen this happen so many times. It's not something I would have ever thought to be a part of the ministry, but I think it's a really important part of the ministry of protecting your sheep and identifying wolves. And I think Jesus did it all the time. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, I think it needs to continue to happen. I don't know what the percentage is. It just seems like it's 1 in 100
like
dudes.
It's more frequent now.
Yeah, I don't know. Is that part of the love of most growing cold, or is it, but there is a percentage of people, and mostly I would say much higher percentage of men.
1 in 3.
Yeah.
Hopefully not that high.
One of us.
But who fall in this category, and I just pray for my kids. I pray for our congregation that they don't get hooked into this. And yeah. So, OJ, you're facing justice right now, and I pray that the other people find peace who suffered because of the ability for him to keep getting away. And I think that's the other thing, is that the arrogance and how many times people can get away with stuff. Goodness. But that's the beauty of God's word, is it says God knows what he's doing, and in the end there will be justice. So be a nice person, Matt.
I feel like I'm getting singled out here. I don't know why.
All right. Well, yeah, I think I'm here and we're here as a church to kind of help you navigate these relationships. If you see some things going on, or you yourself are struggling, like we, trust but verify. No one's gonna, you don't automatically put somebody in one of these categories. But if you see these patterns of these 4 or 5 different characteristics, we do need to care for people, ourselves and others, to make sure that they don't. Because man, when you're involved for 10 years, 20 years with somebody like this, the person just gets emptied of themselves. They become an empty shell, and you never want to see that. So, all right, anything else? God's blessings, may God's protection, God's care, God's wisdom.
Thanks. See ya.
All right.
If you'd like to get a hold of us here at the Climbing Sycamores podcast, feel free to email bsadler@victoryofthelamb.com. bsadler@victoryofthelamb.com. If you like today's intro music, it's been brought to you by Andrew Lynch's song, My Name, Hello.